Did you mention I could use help with leaving a All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and find your seats. Can everyone online hear me okay? Yep. Okay. My name's Dave Powell. I am currently Wake Audubon's president. And so I'm going to get us started with some announcements. I feel like I have quite a few of them tonight, which is a good thing because it means we're doing lots of fun, exciting things. And then I'll hand it off to our speaker for tonight's program. I want to remind everybody that we have bird walks pretty much every weekend of the month. The best way to track what we're doing and when is to go to our website and look at the calendar, or to find us on Meetup. And you can RSVP for all of our bird outings on Meetup. We have walks at Horseshoe Farm, Wendell Community Park, Durant, Hilltop need more this weekend or this month. And we do need help with leading one bird walk for the Olmsted Coalition this Saturday. So if you feel confident and would like to help out with the bird walk, let our education chair, Larry, know. Can you raise your hand, Larry? Or find me and I'll direct you to him. We also have a walk this week, Friday, at the Williamson Preserve. From 8 to 10:30 in the morning. This is a walk we do in partnership with the Triangle Land Conservancy. So if you would like to join that walk, you need to find them on TLC's website and RSVP there. If there's a wait list, there's often cancellations, so sign up for the wait list and you might be able to get in. This Thursday, we have we're notified about an event that some of you all might be interested in. The Driftwood Garden Club in Durham is hosting a raptor-focused event, and they'll have live raptors there, which is always fun, especially for the kids. If you are interested, it starts at 7 p.m. With like a social half hour, and then the program starts at 7:30. It is located at the Sterling Community Clubhouse. It's in Mooresville. And they are asking for people to RSVP. We'll drop a link to that in the chat, but if anyone in the room wants to know more, you can find me and we'll make sure you get connected. Later this month, we have our next session of our beginning birding program. It's on Saturday, October 19th. From 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. This is a free public program. It's a great way to learn the basics of bird identification, how to use binoculars, the guides and apps you'll want to have, learning about how to do it safely. And we do this event in partnership with Field Inclusive and the City of Raleigh Parks. So if you'd like to register for that, we'll drop a link in the chat, and you can find it on our Meetup page as well. It's at Durant Nature Preserve this time. And then Birdability Week is also this month. It's from October 21st to October 27th. This is a partnership with the National Audubon Society, and it's a way that we try to ensure the birding community and the outdoors are welcoming, inclusive, safe, and accessible, with the focus on folks with mobility challenges or other health concerns. So There is a week-long series of events, like virtual events that you can sign up for online through the National Audubon Society. And we're also doing a birdability walk at Walnut Creek Wetlands Center on October 26th. So if you are interested in that, find it on Meetup. All the trails we'll use will be accessible with ramps, pavement, boardwalks, no steps, no steep inclines. All right, that's up for it for our October events. It's starting to feel like fall out there. So I have a couple fall conservation reminders for you. The first one is to leave your leaves. So no reason to spend all that time bagging them up. And they are a great place for wintering habitat for insects, and they improve your soil. A second one is as you're planning for Halloween, stick with just the natural spider webs that you can find all around our communities. That fake web material that gets put out is a hazard for many birds and other small animals. So skip that. Let your neighbors know if you're so inclined. And then also we are in the middle of fall migration season. During the fall migration season, we encourage everybody to participate in our Lights Out program. This means that we ask you between now and November 30th to turn off your outside lights from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that helps to prevent birds from getting confused. It reduces bird collisions. And we have a pledge that you can sign to show your support for the Lights Out program. This helps us with advocacy when we're trying to talk with municipalities and other decision makers to show that we have like community support for these kinds of programs. And we have an awesome new sign and logo to go for with our Lights Out program. We have these yard signs that you can see up front available. They're free. If you're interested in taking one home with you tonight, you can find Missy after, can you raise your hand, Missy? She's in the front row after the program, and she'll try and get you set up. I know some of you have already kind of reserved a sign, so find her. And then we also have some smaller printouts that if you want to put like in an apartment window or like other, places that you would put like a normal kind of 8x11 paper. We have some of those in the back, and I think there's some more up front too. All right. Volunteer opportunities. You all know we are an all-volunteer organization, and this includes our board and like all of our committees and leadership. We are coming up on our board elections, which happen in December. So in November, we will announce like the slate of candidates for next year's board. Board members serve a one-year term. And then in December, we'll vote on that slate of candidates. So if you are interested in getting more involved in Wake Audubon in any kind of leadership or volunteer capacity, please come find me after the meeting. I'm happy to talk to you about what it looks like to be on the board, but we also have lots of other needs, like from volunteer coordinator, tabling materials coordinator, to people to serve on our committees. We have a whole bunch of different committees. They include like our equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging committee, an advocacy committee, conservation committee, finance, communications, social and hospitality, outreach and education. All those committees need people to serve on them, and they need chairs. You don't have to be on the board to be a chair or serve on those committees. So if any of those kinds of things sound interesting to you, or you want to be involved and just don't know how, come find me and we'll talk. One specific opportunity is to serve on our program committee this fall. This is a group of individuals that plans these programs and our field trips for the next year. And so we're starting that process right now. If you have ideas that you want to share with us for what kinds of talks and field trips we should do, or you want to actually participate on the committee and help like design the program for next year, you can find Anne, and she is heading up that committee. And we're always looking for good ideas. So, all right. I swear I'm like sort of almost done. We have a native plant sale twice a year. Right now, our native plant fall sale is going on through now and to October 30th. This is in partnership with the Field to Cottage Nursery. A portion of the proceeds come back to Wake Audubon. And if you're a Wake Audubon member, you also get a 10% discount. So find Field to Cottage Nursery's website, and you use the special code Fall Migration, all one word. You can also find this information in our newsletter. I have an advocacy opportunity I want to flag, especially for those of you who are here in the Raleigh area. If you're familiar with the Fred Fletcher Park, there's a small wetland there, and there is a public meeting coming up on October 15th. It's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., where Raleigh Parks is going to be discussing restoration work to that small wetland. It'd be great for people to show up and talk about how it's a unique birding spot and provide input about what they should be doing during that restoration. If you're interested in that, find myself or one of the other board members, and we'll make sure we get you the information. It's going to be at the Borden Building and Fred Fletcher Amphitheater. All right. Then I'm sure you're well aware, but there's an election coming up, a national election. Wake Audubon is participating in the National Audubon Society's nonpartisan voter education program. It's called I Bird, I Vote. And the goal of this is just raise awareness around the importance of voting, help make sure people have a plan. So there is a pledge on National Audubon Society's website that you can sign and learn more. You can share it with your friends. You can share it on social media. And we have some cool I Bird, I Vote. I don't know what to call them. Posters, coasters, buttons, all kinds of things to help get the word out. Stickers. So if you're interested in, there's 2 different designs. They're in the back of the room tonight. Feel free to grab something at the end of the meeting. They'll be there while the supplies last. And then lastly, if it is your first time joining us here at Wake Audubon, we have a special deal that we always offer to time comers, where we will pay for your membership for the first year. And that includes membership in the National Audubon Society. So if you're interested in taking us up on that offer, I think I saw Jerry. Oh, you're online. That's where I saw you, Jerry. Come find me and I'll make sure you get connected to our membership people, and we can get you that free membership to Wake Audubon and the National Audubon Society. Any announcements I missed, board members? Okay, with that, I'm going to have John introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening, everyone. I still get things like this in the mail. If you want a wall calendar, it'll be back on the table. Feel free to pick it up. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and I'm going to have to read from my phone. Even though I've known the speaker for a number of years, the things I know I can't really tell you. So to be on the safe side, I have to enlarge the font for my aging eyes. So our speaker, Olivia Munzer, she got her BS in zoology from Western Washington University. She did her master's in ecology and organismal biology from Eastern Michigan University. and she did her thesis on the evening bats. So looking at their roosting and dietary ecology, and that's at the northern edge of their range. We have evening bats around here. They're pretty common, aren't they? Yeah, but I guess they're maybe not so common up there. She's worked for over 24 years as a natural resource biologist and throughout the US. So doing things like surveys where the bats roost in their hibernacula, other roosting sites, doing acoustic surveys, mistnet surveys for bats. She also had done a little mistnet bird banding with me in the URs. And then the last 7 years, she's served as the Western Piedmont Habitat Conservation Coordinator with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. So in addition to bat stuff, she gets to do project reviews. So those are, especially when they're development projects of potential impact on our terrestrial and aquatic resources. She still conducts species surveys and collaborates with folks on different conservation projects. Has an interesting one in Guilford County that's going on. And she serves as a committee member on the North Carolina Bat Working Group. And I guess they're part of the Southeastern Bat Working Group too. So there's a big consortium of folks throughout the Southeast. A lot of stuff goes on with bats. And so we've invited Olivia in October, which is sort of our spooky month. And also it's a big season to talk about bats. So she's here to talk to us a little bit about bats. When she's getting set up, I'm going to turn that down if you want that. Oh, there we go.
Do I need to share? Oh. Hold on, I need to share this.
Can you hear okay in the back with the microphone? All right, great. And I guess everything's online, okay? So
I think so.
that looks good on the screen.
Right.
And then I'll be back getting yeah, getting that going. There's, while she's setting up her screen, there's a pair of peregrines. It's probably hard to say that. A pair of peregrines downtown Raleigh. Last year there were a pair and then one left. And then there was one, but now today I got an update from the guy who monitored them, and the second one has come back. So they have at the Wells Fargo, chase away the chimney swift. Sometimes I wrote red hat to get around.
Okay. Okay, is it not sharing? I thought I shared it. I was gonna ask the online folks. Okay, hold on. Okay,
Sometimes it wants one or the other.
screen one. Is it screen two? Maybe it's
that-
screen two. Share. Maybe I didn't do that. Maybe that's what I need to do. Oop. Here.
Is she a co-host?
Yes.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
try the other. Sometimes it doesn't like that. Now it's highlighted. That might do it.
Oh, the application window?
Yeah.
Oh. Is that it? And then if
That
I
it?
do that.
Doesn't like that presentation mode sometimes.
mm,
Here it comes.
Have
There
to-
it is.
Is
How's
that good? No?
It's not showing the,
If you want to try,
Mhm.
you
Oh,
want to go out of presentation mode, we can do that. So like this.
okay.
If you want to try. Underneath that three ellipses, just hide where it says hide presenter, that might help. See what. How's it look now?
Oh, you're stuck. Okay. Let me share again.
Maybe it's not highlighted, I don't know.
does it look different on your screen in the PowerPoint?
No, we took it out of presenter mode, so
Okay.
now it's just regular PowerPoint. Here's what it's showing on here.
What's the difference between application
So when you did the application, it just kept it as the
with
Oh, yeah, so
thing.
try this other one.
So that's what it says.
Then when you go into this mode here, that should pop it up. When you click on that, it should bring you up into there we go.
Nope.
Hang on a sec, here it comes.
Is that it? Yes. Okay.
So we can take it out of presenter mode.
Okay,
You can hide presenter.
if that's all right, as long as you don't need it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and then give it a second because it'll update the screen. You should come back. There you go. You should be okay now.
Okay, well,
Now it's showing on her. Yeah, there we go.
is it good? Okay.
You're on.
Okay. Is that gonna, hopefully that, okay, that'll go away. Okay. All right. Well, since it is Halloween, I am going to start talking a little bit about bats, Halloween. John wanted me to, I don't know.
Screen minimized.
Oh, just
I think-
kidding.
I
It's
think
not
we'll-
quite there yet. We'll get it at some point.
There we go. Maybe
Is there another way?
hide better. There
Up
we go.
here?
Yeah,
Maybe?
that
Okay.
should be clear.
So when people are asked about bats, especially kids, what they think about is Count Dracula and vampires, and they think about Halloween and witches and scary movies and disgusting things that are flying around at night and ugly creatures and blood-sucking bats. And movies, books, and myths and misinformation kind of shapes our images of bats. And historically, bats and even true vampire bats did not influence the folklore of vampires that kind of circulated throughout Europe. And the vampire folklore began in Eastern Europe, primarily in the Balkans, several centuries ago. It was often associated basically with diseases and unrest. And the myth of vampires was thought to be based on a blood disorder called porphyria, as well as rabies and other diseases like tuberculosis. However, the beginning of the connection with bats started when Europeans came to the Americas and actually first saw their first true vampire bats and learned about them lapping blood or sucking blood, as they thought, and realized there was a similarity to the folklore of vampires. However, really not until the 1890s when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula was there a connection between vampires and bats. So just thought I'd throw in some of that folklore into there. But bats and culture, bats have been in our culture for centuries and thousands of years, basically. Ancient Babylonians were thought bats to be physical manifestations of the souls of the dead. Mesoamerican and South American cultures use bats in their art and folklore. And pre-Columbian cultures thought the bats had supernatural powers and used as they thought they had supernatural powers as night hunters. The Mayan gods, Alchemazots, killed dying men on their way to the centers of the earth, going through the cenotes. Bats, which are called zots in the Mayan language, were worshipped for their rule over darkness, hunting at night, and being powerful symbols of strength and against enemies. So bats were also symbols of life, though, since they were fruit-eating bats as well in Central and South America, eating figs and other fruit and expelling their seeds throughout the forest through their droppings and planting new seeds throughout the forest, creating new trees and new life. Bats are best known for their part in the Mayan religion, calendars, as well as in their writings. They are associated with god of night, death, and sacrifice, though, as well. So Guy of Brazil, in Brazil, tell of a tribe that moved through the night, led by a bat, who looked for the light for which to guide them. But not all of these cultures looked as bats as being dark or having more of a negative connotation or an evil or going more towards the dead necessarily. There are a lot of cultures more in the southeast or eastern countries that have more of looking as to bats as more of a positive connotation. For example, the Chinese symbol, the Wu Fu, which is up in that upper corner. So each bat, there's 5 bats, and those each represent 5 joys of life. So we have health, wealth, tranquility, good luck, and longevity. Bats in Chinese sound similar to luck or good fortune. So basically, bats also can be found throughout the world in various symbols in symbology, such as in the lower corner, you can see there's a bat on top of this coat of arms from Spain, as well as in art and other stories and folklore and masks found from Africa and so forth. So there is your background on bats and folklore. But because there's so much positive and negative history about bats, what I want to do is talk about the misconceptions we have about bats and try and clear those up. So bats are blind. Actually, bats can see as well as humans, but rely more on echolocation. All bats carry rabies. Well, actually, in North Carolina, only about 2 to 3% of bats tested that are actually turned into labs to be tested for rabies turn out to be positive. And less than 0.5% of bats that are in the wild contract the disease. All bats suck blood. Well, as I just mentioned, only 3 species of vampire bats occur in the world, and those are in Central and South America. And they actually don't suck blood, they lap up blood. Bats are mice with wings. Actually, they're more closely related to primates than rodents. Bats get tangled in your hair. And no, they echolocate, so they're pretty good at doing what they do. So here are some bat basic facts. So they're in the order Chiroptera, which is a big group in their own. And that means in Greek means hand wing. So if you take your hands, basically they have the arms and hands that we do, the bones, but they're just elongated. So if you look at yours and compare it to theirs, you see, oh, they do have so here, right here, that's their thumb. And then here, I can do this easily, are the 4 fingers. So they're basically like this. And in between is where the wings are, wing membranes. And here, if you notice, their feet are actually turned backwards so they can hang upside down. They are the only true mammal that flies. They are the 2nd largest group of mammals. And actually, there's over 1,400 species that have been identified, and that number keeps growing. They occur on all continents except the Antarctica. Their lifespan is 20 years, which is really good for some of those species that are that small, and that includes some of the species that occur in North Carolina. The longest living bat is the Brandt's bat, which is 41 years. The largest bat weighs 2.6 pounds and has a wingspan of 5.7, almost 6 feet. And that's the golden crown flying fox right here, and that's from Southeastern Asia. And I mean, that's pretty big. But the smallest one is the Kitts hognose, or also the bumblebee bat, which is just super tiny. And it only weighs 2 grams. But in North Carolina, our largest bat, its wingspan is only about 16 inches. And our smallest is super tiny. It's only about, I should have remembered how long it is. It's probably just, I think it's 12 inches. And that's the tricolored bat. Mexican free-tailed bats, they can go have sorry, need some water. Some short bursts of flight at 100 miles per hour. And our species, most bats only have one pup per year, which is one baby per year. For a species that is for a species that small, for a lot of our species that occur in America, that is pretty incredible that they only have one per year. But that's also the sad part, is that their reproductive rate is so slow compared to something like a mouse. There is a couple of species in the United States, like the hoary bat, and I'll show that picture to you. They can have up to 4, but it's usually an average of 2. Some more facts. Oops. Just to show the diversity of bats from around the world, is that they are so diverse in their faces, their structure, their ears, their faces. So I just like pointing this out to people because they're amazing. There's some really cute ones, like some of these flying fox, and then you got some less cute ones, as I like to point out. You've got some like these hammerhead ones where the males, and only the males look like this, and they make these honking noises for a mating call. And then you have some that have mohawks. So, and then you have your vampire bats right there. So they really are diverse, but they're not only diverse in how they look and their morphology or their physiology, but they also their diet. So they eat, depending on the species, insects, fruit, nectar, pollen, fish, other vertebrates like birds, other bats, small mammals, amphibians, and blood. So they really depend. They really are very incredible. They also roost in very different places. When I mean roost is whether they go for the night or to rest. So they will go in foliage, like hanging from a tree limb right here, like this red bat, which we have here in North Carolina. They'll go in caves or rock crevices and cracks or crevices in trees under exfoliating bark, or in human structures, like everybody knows our house, or under bridges or in culverts. So they occur in very different places, depending on what species. They can be colonial or solitary. They can be in millions and thousands, or it can be just hang out by themselves. And this is kind of what I was talking about they can occur in different, just so you have an idea, because this is very relevant for us here in North Carolina, is a lot of our species in North Carolina occur under shaggy bark, like the white, like shagbark hickory or white oak, or under sloughing bark. And when we say we want you to, when you have to landowners, we say it's good to keep your dying or decaying trees, because sometimes they'll hang out right under that exfoliating bark. And these little cracks or crevices left by woodpeckers, or these cracks right here. Interestingly, these red bats in winter, sometimes they'll go in the leaf litter on the ground. And so when our guys go do prescribed burns, these guys will pop up from the ground. And that's just one of their strategies over winter to stay a little warmer. Here's some Spanish moss. And then here's, I don't know, I like this picture because it was taken under a bridge in one of these like wells. And this is a bat yawning. And I just love, I don't know. I really like that the bat was yawning. But they also, so another couple of things I wanted to mention was that they also have different strategies of how they deal with, at least in northern, for weather, for like hibernation, of how they deal with winter. So they either hibernate or they migrate, kind of like birds, or I guess birds don't hibernate, sorry. So hibernate. Hibernate like bears. So they just go into what we call a hibernaculum. It's either a cave or a mine or some type of structure where they can go for the winter, like a bear, And they basically shut down their metabolism so they don't have to eat or drink like a bear or other animals. And there's also another strategy, which is a little less so, which is something they do here in the Piedmont or also the coastal plain, is they'll go into torpor, which is kind of like what I call term like hibernation light. They don't go as deep, they don't shut down their metabolism quite so much. So they can wake up more suddenly and it doesn't take as much energy. So on a warm night, when there's insects around in the winter, they can come up and they can go forage and drink water. So it doesn't take as much energy. But hibernation usually occurs like in mountains or further up north. But bats can also do migration with the birds. So some like the hoary bats, we usually only capture them here in the Piedmont during migration. So May, we haven't done as much netting in the fall. But they will go from Canada all the way down to Texas. They're long distance migrators. And then we also have regional migrators who won't go quite as far, who might go up to 300 miles. And then we have sedentary, more residents, as you would say, with birds, who will just stick around for the year long, like Mexican free-tailed bats or big brown bats. They'll stick around for the winter. Or red bats, and you'll see them foraging, at least in the Piedmont. You'll see them foraging in the warmer nights in the winter. So those are kind of the strategies here in North Carolina. So in the United States, we have 47 species. In North Carolina, we have 17 species, which is quite a few species. And one of the reasons for that is that we've got the north, we're kind of in the middle between the northeast and the southeast. And so we kind of have some of those that kind of creep in from the north and some of those that you would only see kind of creep in from the south. So kind of some of those status and threats. One thing, so some of the statuses that we have, some of the species that we have in North Carolina that are, we've got the proposed endangered tricolored bat. Some of you might have heard about this bat. It is supposed to be listed, actually it was supposed to be probably listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service probably about a year and a half ago. It's supposed to be listed as endangered. It's throughout all of North Carolina, and it should be listed here pretty quick. And it is being listed because of a disease called white nose syndrome, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And the little brown bat is also impacted by white nose syndrome and is expected to potentially be listed in the future. Then we have 3 federally endangered species. Actually, we have 4 now. The northern long-eared bat just got listed recently within the last year. So we have 4 federally endangered species, 3 of which are impacted by white nose syndrome. The small-footed is, but it wasn't listed. It's state special concern only. And then we have the southeastern bat, which is coastal. And then we have a state threatened. So we have quite a few of our bats that are on this list of either federally rare or federally threatened or endangered or state concern. And that's very telling. That's quite a few species. And I mentioned white nose syndrome. And if you haven't heard about, no one can really talk about bats without talking about white nose syndrome. If you haven't heard about it, it's devastating. It's a fungal disease that they believe is native to Europe and or Asia. It's called Pseudogymnoascus destructans. And it was discovered in New York in 2006, and it's caused over 6 million deaths of bats. 6 million bats have died. And that number of deaths was counted probably like 8 years ago. It feels like they just stopped counting. And the disease has spread since then. In North Carolina, it affects 7 species. And basically what it is so This is the disease, PD, we call it PD for short. And so once that fungus starts growing, white nose syndrome is named for the fungus when it becomes visible. And basically it starts growing on the bat, on its nose, any of the membranes. And it basically kind of just, as it grows, it wakes up the bat and it just causes physiological disruption. And it causes starvation and water loss because the bat wakes up from hibernation. So it only affects hibernating bats. It's a cold, moist, thriving fungus species. And so these hibernating bats wake up, but there's no water because it's all frozen, and there's no insects because it's winter. And so essentially they starve to death. So biologists would go up and they'd survey for bats during their hibernaculous surveys, and there'd be dead bats out in the snow. So we go back to this. When we look at what species are susceptible to white nose: Indiana bat, gray bat, northern long-eared bat, small-footed bat, southeastern bat, tricolor bat, little brown bat, and big brown bat. Now, most of these are within a group, a genera called Myotis. And then we've got big brown bat. And so these guys are just being wiped out. Now, if you look at, this is a map of how it's spread over the last years. Here is New York, where it first started. And over the years, it has just grown. So now it's in 40 states and 9 provinces, and it continues to just continues to go westward. In North Carolina, we just assume it's all in the mountains because we don't have hibernacula in every state that we survey. However, we survey the mines or caves that we have in the Piedmont, and each year we find more, and we always swab them, and I'll go into the process here in a minute. And every year we find new ones that test positive. And so this year it was Chatham and Wake County. However, because they only go into torpor and they can forage and drink water in the winter, we think that that's the reason why they're not succumbing to white nose and why they can fight off, because we haven't found dead bats due to white nose, and their numbers have actually grown rather than dropped. But they face additional threats to white nose. And as you see, we have the housing density. This is 1980, 2000, we're getting a little further dense for a house per how many acres. And then this is 2030. So we see how the habitat, as I showed you, a lot of these bats are using trees. And we're seeing how a lot of these trees are being turned into housing developments and commercialization. But we also have the habitat fragmentation overall. Wind power is something else, not as much in our state as it is in other states, but wind power does kill bats, especially the long migrants. And actually, some species of long migratory bats are being considered, eventually will be looked at as being listed in a couple of years for review. Pollution, climate change, mine closures for reclamation and development for safety concerns, and I'll kind of explain that one here in a second. And then cumulative impacts, which is just taking everything together, all these impacts, and how it's affecting bats and all of our other species. So one way we kind of track how all this is affecting our bats are by doing long-term monitoring surveys. And so first one way is looking at a hibernacula, like I was telling you, is each winter we go out and we survey each hibernacula either every winter or every other winter, and we count the number of bats and we swap them to see if they have white nose. Then we also do mist-net surveys in the summer, often at long-term monitoring sites and at new sites. We do roost sites at some of these man-made structures like bridges and culverts, which we've learned have become really important, especially as these other types of structures like roof structures, like trees, or even hibernacula have disappeared. And then we do something called NA-BAT, which is a program using acoustic detectors to pick up the bat calls. And it's a new way to be able to monitor bats without actually having to trap them. So, but one thing I want to talk about for hibernacula is the North Carolina, this is another sidebar here, North Carolina gold. And you might not know, but the first documented gold in the US was actually in North Carolina. And it was found by Conrad Reed in 1799. And I swear to you, there is a connection to bats here. And it's the only gold producing state from 1803 to 1828. And it was the lead producer until the California Gold Rush of 1848. And Charlotte actually had the federal gold mint from 1838 until 1861. And, you know, after that, there was a little bit of gold renewed interest. And actually, if you go back into the UREs and in certain parts, there's still gold panning around. And here is actually a kind of a picture of all the recorded mines in North Carolina. There's a few kind of scattered here in the coastal plain. There's some here, and there's a whole bunch throughout here. And it's not just gold, but it's other mines as well. But right here in the UREs was a big gold mine area, and actually up here, Nash County, that area was actually a big mining area as well. Well, the bats, we learned that there's gold mines in the Piedmont. And so we were trying to find out, since a lot of the Piedmont is actually privately owned, we knew there were old mines out there. So we tried to reach out to people and said, hey, if you have an old mine shaft on it, please give us a call because we're looking for bats. This was a couple of years ago. We sent these flyers out. And so we weren't too lucky with those because I think people really were trying, you know, people don't like the state being on their land or going into their mines, but some people reached out to us and we were lucky. So we did expand the number of hibernacula we could survey. But what we do is we go out and we go in, we abide by white nose surveillance response. Like we don on all this equipment to make sure we don't transfer any white nose from one mine to another. And we go through all this protocol. And often people who pass by us think like there's some type of like toxin nearby because we look like really crazy people. And we go in and we count and then we swab these bats. Maybe. Okay. And then, and the story ends there. Oh, so then okay, there we go. And then we kind of determine if it's positive, stable, or negative. And in the Piedmont, we've actually found that it's actually increasing, which is great news. And so, but these are some of the ones. So I don't know if you've ever been to Davidson County, Boone's Cave. And we just gated it. So the main part where bats stay, you can't access during. But these are kind of the crazy things we do. And this is a coastal plain. You would never think there's mines or caves in the coastal plain, but there's like 2 of them that we know of. But this is them doing those. And we actually found one on our game land by chance, and it's actually we started out with 30 a couple of years ago. We gated it, and now we have 84. And they like double every year, and it's amazing. And so that's good news. So for us in the Piedmont, it's great news. For the mountain, it hasn't been great news. So starting in 2011, when white nose came to North Carolina, we saw a great decrease, and it's become stable. And I think actually in some of this data is a little old, but I think it's actually starting to go up just a tiny bit, depending on the species. but there's that bad news. But the Piedmont overall is much better. So then with mist net surveys, what we do is we go out, we have these, it's like a hair, you know, when you have hair nets, it's like a hair net basically, except it can be up to 18 meters long and 30 feet tall. And you hang it out. It's like bird nets. You gone birding with John or anybody? It's like that, but like supersized. And we go out and we catch bats. And we used to ban them until we figured out that they might be hurting the band. So we don't ban bats anymore. But we determine what species are present. And at long-term sites, we see if there's if the population's increasing or decreasing. And it's a little harder because it depends. It's a little harder to actually determine that. But in the mountains, they actually found that the small-footed bat actually increased, but a lot of them actually decreased. In the Piedmont, we haven't done enough established long-term netting as long as the mountains because no one really cared about the Piedmont for a long time. So unfortunately, but we're working on it. And now that the tricolored bat's getting listed, I think more interest is going to be in the Piedmont. But we'll see. So, but we also do these other things, roost surveys, and we go out and we survey these bridges. And we found that especially tricolored bats, they love culverts. I don't know if you've ever been in a culvert or know what a culvert is. It's those big barrels that are under bridges and streets. Under streets or highways, and they love those things. And they like that I guess it's like their alternative to caves and mines. And so they love going in there. And so we go in there, hold on. Oh, yeah. So we go in those in the winter and we count them and we swab them. And that's actually, unfortunately, one of the things we found. We found white nose in Guilford County from a culvert and actually in Wake County from a culvert. Which is unfortunate, but it's giving us data and we're learning more from them. And interestingly, also, we've reached out to cities and municipalities about their stormwater structures. I did a presentation to them because Morrisville contacted us and they said their guys found, I don't know if you've ever, this is really weird. It's called a sand filter and it was under an apartment parking lot. And it's like a detention. It helps with stormwater and it helps clean it before it goes out. And it helps just reduce like erosion and helps just slowly dissipate stormwater. And it's this huge structure. It's like probably that whole section, and it's underground. And they found tricolored bats in it. So we went, we went in there and there was 2 years ago and there's 5 tricolored bats in there. I'm like, how do they get in here? So we think, so there was a storm pipe coming out of it. And then of course there's the gutters on the side of the curbs that go into it. And we're like, well, how do they do this? So we were doing this other study and we're like, well, we'll put cameras up. We put game cameras up. We put acoustics up. Couldn't figure it out because the game camera didn't catch anything. So we went back and now there's 7. And we're like, this is really interesting. We still don't know how they're getting out. So now this winter, we're going to try and figure out if they're coming out of the curb and the gutter. It's just really fascinating. So they keep popping up in these random places, but we're trying to get the word out. So hopefully we'll find out more interesting parts where these guys are hanging out. Uh-oh. Okay, now we got to go faster. So, but anyways, so there's just all these cool things that are happening with these bats. So the North American Bat Monitoring Program is actually a citizen science program where if you're interested to doing a little bat work, it's basically using this bat acoustics and you drive around with this recorder and it basically takes the bat calls and it kind of translates it into this, which is actually kind of what the call of this tricolored bat looks like. And each bat has more or less kind of a signature call. The Myotis genera, which I was kind of talking about before, they're way too similar to really tell apart. So you couldn't really tell some of the more endangered or threatened species apart. But it gives us an idea. These guys are really easier to tell apart. But it gives us an idea of how they're doing. So if you do it year after year, like this up in the mountains, you can see so it just shows you over time, like the population. And if you do it enough, it helps and gives you a good idea of what's going on. Sorry, online people. But it gives us an idea. And it's a lot easier and less invasive than some of our other techniques like mist netting. But basically that I know it sounds doom and gloom, but there is hopefulness in that there are things that are going on, like a lot of research recently, or I guess over the last 24 years or so, that people are doing to help try and fight white nose syndrome. And I think that's probably the biggest issue right now, because like I mentioned, bats don't have, their reproduction rate is so low. And you're having these mass die-offs. I mean, unfortunately, we probably won't see the numbers of bats that we've seen before. I mean, it just isn't going to happen. But you know, they're doing things like testing out UV lights to try and fight white nose, the fungus. They're trying out vaccines. They're trying out sprays and things like that. They're doing a lot of research to try and help these bats. And they are getting ahead of it. And there's actually this program that Catherine Etchison, who's the state bat biologist in the mountains, her and Dr. Rada Petrick out of UNC, they participated in a project from Bat Conservation International. It's called the Fat Bat Project. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking UV lights and they're tracking all these insects in the fall during a time called swarming, where a lot of bats kind of come together near a hibernacula. Sometimes a lot of bats mate in the fall. They all come together, and that they're like, okay, well, we'll bring in all these insects right before or during swarming, right before they go into hibernation, get them really fat and before they go into hibernation, and see if that helps them survive the winter. And so that's happening across the nation to see, well, maybe that's just the key, because some of these bigger species like the gray bat are bigger and they seem to be doing okay. And so maybe that's the solution. So there's programs like that are hopeful. It's like, maybe we just need fat bats. Like fat bear contest. But there's also things that like you all can help with, is, you know, tell people. I know people just hate bats. You know, some people are just like, they're disgusting. You know, telling them about just bat facts. For example, tequila. They are one of the primary pollinators of the agave plant that produces tequila. So every time you drink tequila, say cheers to a bat. You know, without bats, we wouldn't have chocolate, because they disperse the seeds of chocolates or mangoes or almonds or avocados, or so many of these plants or foods that we need are either dispersed by bats or, you know, or pollinated by bats. And then you have insects, of course, which is what most of our bats are insectivores, and they save farmers billions of dollars each year. Which, they eat up to 1,000 insects per hour. And actually there was just a study out, which was an amazing study, and I probably can't do it justice, but essentially somebody looked at white nose and the impact of white nose in a community and the impact of the increase of pesticide that the farmer had to use and the increase in infant mortality because of the pesticide, which was a really interesting study. But, there's things like that are important for people to know, because I think a lot of it is just misinformation throughout the world. It's not people not realizing how much and how important they are for us. And then also just people always ask us, well, how can we put up a bat house? That's one of the main questions we always get. And there has been a lot of research done lately about bat houses, and actually a lot of places that people get their bat houses are inadequate. So like Bat Conservation International has a lot of information. It's done a lot of studies on bat houses, and they actually have to be pretty robust because bats need enough space. So there's enough, because they have to make sure there's enough, the temperature in there is adequate. Because if it's too small, it's just going to get, they're just going to get overheated in the summer, and then and they found a lot of bats, just a lot of babies end up dead during the maternity season. So there's things like, if you want to do a bat house, there's things, Bat Conservation International has a very good video and also instructions on how to make them. And we always suggest now do a multi-chamber, so that way the bats can thermoregulate and go to different parts of it, make sure it's high enough and potentially near water, or, sometimes just painting it the right color based upon how much sun it gets and things like that. They do a great job at really telling you great tips on where to put your bat house and how to do it right. Unfortunately, people sell bat houses, they're just not right. And then they fail, and then people give up, and it's just unfortunate. So, and we have, sadly, we have a lot of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I think it's mostly Boy Scouts who build bat houses. And unfortunately, they don't do it the right way. And so we always feel bad because we're like, oh, they want to give it to us, but we don't, I don't know. So we always want to work with people to make sure that it's done right. So if you know of anybody who we can work with to do it right, we'd love to. So we'd appreciate good bat ambassadors. So, any questions? I think that's it. Yes.
Probably too early, but has anyone got any information on the bats in the mountains? There's a lot of known colonies being created over the night shift. Most places running water. And a lot of that rain came down here today, but even if it came down at night, would they leave? And if they left, where would they go? I suspect a lot of the colonies are dead.
Yeah, I don't.
Just trying to survive themselves.
Yeah, Catherine. I was curious about it. I was thinking the same thing. And Catherine Etchison, her house, got a little flooded. And I'm sure she's asking the same thing. I mean, luckily, there's a lot more caves and mines up there. So I think a lot of the bats go up there. There are a lot of the bridges they do. Luckily, it's fall enough that I think, all the maternity season's over, thankfully. So all the babies are out flying. Hopefully they're already starting to feel out where they're going to go for the winter. I don't know how cold it was at that point. So hopefully they were already kind of going towards caves, and those were safer spots is what I'm hoping. But surprisingly, with all that rain, even here, when I went into our hibernacula here, there weren't any bats in there, even with all the rain and the storms and all that. So I don't know, I guess they're hanging out in the in the trees and just holding on tight. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know how fast she'll be able to get out there, but hopefully there wasn't a significant loss. So I know the hurricanes on some of the Caribbean islands after the hurricanes there was a big hit to bats.
What's the natural predator? What's their range?
So kind of depending on where you are. So a lot of tropical regions, there will be like snakes that will like hang out at the mouth of the caves and they'll just snatch them as they come through. And there's really not much they can do except just be really fast and quick. Or, even, in the caves, babies drop, they're gone by whatever insect eats them, or, if they can't get up fast enough. Birds love them. At the Austin Bridge, if you've ever been down at Congress, seeing like grackles tear bats apart. Hawks, owls love bats. Birds love them. And there's not much, just being fast. And like some of those colonies, I mean, they're just huge. If you see like the colonies in Austin, I mean, they're big enough that they're kind of like a big bird. God, I'm completely blank. Big flight of birds that, whoever's on the outside, unfortunately, might not be as lucky. Other than that, there's some fish-eating bats. Oh, that's one species. One thing, one diet, one food that I forgot to mention, fish. So there are fish-eating bats. Maybe something probably, larger fish might jump up and eat those fish-eating bats. So I'm sure there's other things that eat bats in other countries. Oh. What species of bats are most likely to use bat houses in Wake County? So definitely big brown bats. What's that? Oh, the question was, sorry, what species in Wake County would use a bat house? So big brown bats are probably the most common. You could get free-tailed bats, Mexican free-tailed bats. And interestingly, their range is expanded into North Carolina. They keep going way north. They really like structures though. They love houses and they love bridges and things like that. And then you could get an evening bat in there. I'd say if we still had little brown bats, but we haven't seen a little brown bat in the Piedmont since 2016. Big brown bats, and big brown bats if you could get it, if you happen to get a bat in your bat house and you can get a good picture, we could usually identify it. Just so you know. Is there any more questions?
I don't think that,
Okay.
anyone else.
Anybody else?
My sister's really good at getting bats in her attic.
Oh.
Like an accomplishment, and they were told by the company to take them out, but not until after the breeding season. Because they really couldn't have them in the house. They put up bat houses and such. I haven't asked them lately. Question is, are all the companies really following that rule? Are they really like not getting rid of the bats until they finish having their babies? Or
I hope so.
We find someone.
Legally, they're not supposed to. Yeah. So it should be May through for those companies. I don't know. Might be the end of August for those companies. People have different dates for different things. Might be end of August for those. There are different things. You, as a homeowner, you can also do it yourself. There are tricks to it. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Wondering what you think accounts for the sudden big interest in bats in the last 30 years. Just an example, I used to work with mammal collection here. I worked with Mary St. Clark. You know, he was studying big-eared bat, bat nest big-eared bat. And, no one seemed to know anything about bats, or the commission didn't have as much of a non-game program. Now we've got bat biologists, but, you know, back in those days, you could say bats were always unpopular, but there were plenty of people interested in spiders and sharks and snakes and things like that 30, 40 years ago. No one was working with bats. You know, just as an example, you know, Mary Kay would survey all these old houses for big-eared bats, but she never thought to look under the bridge. Until she read an article in a magazine that was mathematics using the bridge in Florida. So a guy named Daryl Detour and I went out one day and we found 3 or 4 species of bats using bridges. I think we were the first people to ever see or notice or report bats using bridges in North Carolina. And it just seems like no one knew anything about bats, and now there's, what do you think counts for that sudden interest?
Yeah, even when I was in school, our meetings were tiny, and now I think mostly it was white nose. It really, I think when the species really started to become threatened, then everybody got interested, because now, like, I feel like everybody used to know everybody, and now there's so many new faces. I'd say white nose, probably. So.
It seems to me that the colonial bats usually have this one cup, and the tree roosters, like the yellow and the orient red and the Seminole, they have 3 or 4. What do you think that is?
Good question. I have no idea.
Figure out how people are likely to have 4 babies because if one straight, another female might care for it or something. If a red bat drops a baby, it's gone.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why they have 4. I got 3 more. No, I don't know. I guess I've never known that, or thought about that. I don't know. It's a good question.
For those who aren't aware, maybe, or, I recommend there's a podcast called The Batman and the Bridge Builder. It's 99% invisible. And it's a fascinating story about Austin and that's, you know, bridge there. And it's a really interesting discussion, a collaboration between you know, the biologists and the engineers and architects, and really a sort of a success story about how they now build bridges specifically to allow bats. They found a specific size crevice that was like perfect for bats. It just happened to be, but they found that it was a little too big or a little too small. You know, it won't come to the bats. But and they sort of convinced the people of Austin that this was a good thing. So it's called it's 99% invisible. I think it's the podcast. I think if anybody was interested, it's called The Batman and the Bridge Builder.
Yeah, I wish our DOT did that. They're doing the opposite, because there's the channel beam bridges that Catherine Etchison found. Well, actually, she found a paper done like 20, 30 years ago. There's 2 different students did a whole bunch of surveys on the coastal plain. They found this particular bridge, their channel beam bridges, and the bats loved them. And she went back and she's been surveying those same bridges, and a lot of those bridges are being taken out and just done to the, like, those flat, I forgot what they're called, slab bridges or whatever, or the ones with the aluminum underneath. And it's just, and they just don't want bats. Like, it's just, they're doing everything else not to have bats in their bridges. So I wish they would. And then, yeah, they just, every time we go out, we tried to do a couple more samples of those and keep popping up new bridges. So.
There is one more.
Oh. Does Wake Audubon sell bat houses?
Did we sell that?
I don't know.
No bat houses.
If you do, just make sure they're sized right.
It's gotta do it right.
Yeah.
Good thing we know somebody who can help us.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
I was just thinking, maybe you could give instructions on the bat house, you put in the newsletter, just the right size and
Mhm.
such, I know any Boy Scouts or any other.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we love that they're interested. I hate that it's going to waste, you know?
We need to know.
Yeah. And we should just contact them and just reach out, but I don't know. I guess I just need to call their headquarters, I guess. What's that?
You can make one of that.
Yeah. Well, and I know they've done some work in state parks, and I think they work with the state parks really tries to do, they do the rocket boxes, and they've had a couple students or projects they do, and they do the big boxes, but it's a lot of work because you have to get the lumber and, you know, it's a lot. So they probably don't want to do the big houses because then you have to find all the right lumber and might just be too much too, so.
I mean, you could just recommend this is how it should be, and then that's up to them.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good point.
I like big projects.
Yeah, it should be like a group project. It's good community, like group effort. So,
All right, well,
again, I'm sorry my computer died, but it's too exciting.
please join me in thanking. So we have refreshments in the back of the room. Feel free to hang out and chat, connect for a little while. You can see Missy for yard signs up in front. We have I Vote here in the back. And do we need to clean up the chairs tonight, John?
Yeah, the very back, we go to more like plenty room, I'm leaving those out, they were out.